Hey guys, today we're going to be looking at what the American West was like before 1865 and focusing especially on the Native American tribe known as the Sioux. Here are your video goals. By 1865, the United States has managed to settle both the east and west coasts of the continent. So if you look at that map there, you'll see on the east coast, that is over to the right hand of the map, all these red lines crisscrossing the states. And those are all railroads. And notice that the railroads stop when you get to around Texas and Missouri. After that, it's all very sparsely populated and is largely controlled by Native American tribes. And on the west coast, over there on the left, California, Oregon, and Washington, you're also starting to see settlements spring up as people head west for the great farmland and for the gold rush. But the middle of the country is still essentially free from U.S. control. And because the U.S. hasn't moved in there yet, there's still a lot of Native American tribes living there and thriving there. And two major groups are the Plains Indians, who live on the big grasslands before the Rocky Mountains, and then Indians in the desert Southwest, who are farmers. And we're going to focus especially today on the Plains Indian. So on this map you can see where the Great Plains are. So the green area here is basically all dry grassland. It's not a desert, but it's still dry enough that it really doesn't rain enough to support forests. So this is a space in between the Rocky Mountains to the west, which begin in like New Mexico and Colorado, and the forests to the east. And what happens here is this grassland is so dry that at first U.S. settlers don't want to settle here because they're not sure that they can support crops. But Native Americans move here and realize that this is actually a pretty great place to be, and set up new societies here and merge with existing societies as they're forced westward. And so we're going to check out one particular Native American tribe who inhabits the Great Plains, and they are known as the Sioux. And you can see them up there around Minnesota and the Dakotas. So let's take a closer look at that. The Sioux were a very powerful Native American tribe, and originally they lived up around the Great Lakes near Minnesota. But what happened is as Europeans moved in, they forced the Sioux out of their traditional territory. And the Sioux were forced to move west, out of the forests and into the dry grasslands. But the Sioux were able to bring something with them, and this was horses. And this was incredibly important for the development of Sioux culture. So Sioux went from being farmers and gatherers over in the forests near the Great Lakes to becoming hunters who used their horses in the Great Plains. And with the abilities given to them by horses, they had some huge advantages over the other Native American tribes who lived there. So they were able to get really, really good at riding horses, and this made them very mobile and very dangerous. And they were able to use horses to drive out their competitors. One specific example are Pawnee Indians, who were actually driven out of their territory in what is modern-day Nebraska. But also, horses made them very effective at hunting buffalo. And because there were millions and millions of buffalo in the Great Plains, the Sioux now had access to an entirely new and very plentiful food source. And this made the Sioux a very powerful Native American group. Sioux buffalo hunt. So you can see there the two Native American riders riding bareback on their horses, spearing the buffalo to death. And you can see under that buffalo, there is a trampled rider and a trampled horse. So obviously hunting these giant beasts, the buffalo, is pretty dangerous, but really the Sioux were very successful at it. And it's not common for a Sioux hunter to be killed by a buffalo. Much more frequently, the buffalo are being killed by the Sioux. And so with the horses and with their ability to hunt the buffalo, the Sioux now have access to essentially an unlimited resource for food. And the main thing they eat is buffalo, and everything they use is made out of buffalo. They make tools out of buffalo bones, they make clothes out of buffalo skin, they make stuff out of buffalo organs. They use every part of the buffalo, and it's the major resource in Sioux society and other Great Plains societies as well. So one very interesting thing to know about Sioux society is that unlike American society, that is U.S. society, the Sioux are decentralized. And what that means is that there's no one person who can tell the Sioux what to do. Rather, the Sioux live in small bands of just a couple families working together. And sometimes they'll meet up into bigger groups. But most of the time they're in these smaller groups, and really these bands don't have to listen to anybody outside of themselves, except on a few key issues. So the bands are organized up into larger groups called chiefdoms, but the chiefs really have pretty limited power over what to tell small family bands to do. So really, if you were a Sioux, you didn't really have to listen to that many people. Maybe you had to listen to your family members and a couple other people you lived with, but there was really nobody who could tell you what to do or where to go. On top of this, they lived a nomadic lifestyle, which means there wasn't any particular one place that was home. They moved around constantly following the buffalo, and so what this meant is their territory wasn't always very clearly defined, not anything like a state or a country where they necessarily lived. One hollow horn, and he's dressed pretty awesomely, if you ask me, and his clothes are made largely out of buffalo hide. He's also wearing some bone and feathers, so all very natural objects that he's wearing. And one thing I want to emphasize a lot is that these chiefs have pretty limited control over individual bands. So if the chief decides, hey, we're all going to move over here, he can't really just make everybody do it. Instead, he has to talk to people and convince them that this is a good idea. And this is going to be important for negotiations between the United States and the Sioux later on. Also, I want to emphasize that now that the Sioux have horses, they are very powerful warriors. And even though they don't really have access to guns or anything like that, their ability to ride very, very well makes them very dangerous. And what this means is that when the United States settlers start moving in on Sioux territory, they're up against a pretty powerful group. And the Sioux are not going to go away without a fight. And the United States is eventually going to have to bring in horsemen of their own and fight the Sioux for control of the Dakotas. And so this is just a little bit of a preview of what we're going to be looking at in tomorrow's video. But basically, the Sioux and other Plains Indians are going to put up the last great resistance to European settlement and control of the continent. They've got a lot of people, they've got horses, and they're far away from the centers of U.S. power. So they're going to put up one last fight in the name of Native American independence. And we're going to see tomorrow how even though they wage a very noble struggle, they are going to eventually be defeated and put onto reservations by the United States.